But first, they're the homegrown sheepskin slippers that took the world by storm. Yet their famous nickname, UggBoots, is a fiercely protected trademark owned by a US fashion giant. Now, a Western Sydney bootmaker says he has evidence that Ugg is stolen Aussie lingo, and he's taking his claim back to court. Anne Barker reports.
Eddie Euger fell in love with Ugg boots as a kid.
At the age of 11, I got my first pair of Ugg boots. I begged my mum for a pair.
And before long, Ugg boots had become Eddie's life. When he left school, he trained as a tanner, working with skins and hides. By 19, he was making and selling sheepskin boots.
They were ugly boots. They were ugly, but they were, if you didn't have one, you weren't part of the crowd.
From those early days as surfwear, Ugg boots became an Australian fashion icon. Today they're a luxury product sold around the world. Eddie Euger's factory alone sells 50,000 pairs a year, but he's banned from using the word Ugg overseas.
We got about 190 styles now, and we supply many shops here in Sydney and Australia-wide. We sell a lot on the internet. But unfortunately, we have to compete in Australia and we can't export our products out.
Despite its Australian origins, the Ugg trademark is American-owned. Footwear giant Deckers sells $1 billion worth of Ugg boots a year worldwide and fiercely protects its brand.
It affected the whole industry, that no one can sell it into the US or anywhere else in the world because apparently they've got it registered in about 130 countries around the world.
Deckers has already sued 2 Australian bootmakers. Now it's suing Australian Leather in the US District Court in Chicago, alleging it's illegally sold Ugg boots in America. But suddenly the tables have turned on Deckers. The Aussie bootmaker is counter-suing the multinational, alleging the Ugg trademark was based on a falsehood and should never have been granted.
Deckers alleged that Eddie breached the trademarks in the US. So what we're alleging now is that the trademarks in the US are actually invalid, that they've been obtained through alleged fraud. And if we can establish that case, then we're going to be seeking an order from the court that they be invalidated.
So in 1978, a surf buddy and I brought 6 pairs of boots in from Australia to start our own business and surf.
The legal case relies on this book by Australian entrepreneur Brian Smith, who first registered the Ugg trademark in the US. At the time, Smith declared there was no significance of the word Ugg in the relevant trade or industry, but his autobiography tells a different story.
He's sort of saying that he was the first person to think of the word Ugg in America, when in actual fact he recognised in his book that the word Ugg was a very, very big thing. It's a big thing in Australia, and he wanted to bring that to America to make a lot of money.
Old surf magazines have been found as evidence to prove Ugg boots were already big by 1970, not just in Australia.
The more we can show that people in America were using the word Ugg in a generic sense, the better our case. So what we've been trying to do is using, obviously, Brian Smith's book to identify particular places and times that Ugg boots were advertised in a generic sense and getting copies of those advertisements.
In fact, Australians have been making Ugg boots for decades. Just ask Graham Spencer in South Australia. He says his father Charlie invented the very first Ugg boots in Australia back in the 60s, and he still has his father's very first pattern.
The original still got them, and there it is. The original Ugg boot, the one that we sold thousands of.
Not only that, Graham Spencer says it was his father who invented the name Ugg boots.
A customer of his came in and said, "They're the ugliest boots she had ever seen." And he said, "That's it, we can't call them ugly," and he just came up with UGG.
The name was even registered in Adelaide in 1971 by John Arnold, the local surf shop owner who bought most of Charlie Spencer's boots.
Because people were trying to knock him off with UGH, UG, and that's when he actually registered the name UGG in 1971 here in Adelaide, and it's in the courts here in 1971. It was registered by him.
South Australian Senator Nick Xenophon says there's more at stake than just Ugg boots. He wants legislation to set up industry trademarks to protect even generic names like Ugg or Barramundi.
This is a battle worth having. If the French can protect the use of the name champagne, the Greeks the use of the word feta, then surely Australia can protect the use of the word Ugg for Australian manufacturers.
Lawyers for Deckers and Brian Smith won't respond to questions from the ABC, but they argue the word Ugg has never been a generic term anywhere, and they say the fraud claims have been raised before but lack merit. But if Eddie Euger wins his case, the Ugg name will be open to all Ugg boot makers, and Australian companies will be able to export them for the first time in decades.
Deckers would no longer have the right to exclude competitors who are using the word Ugg in America.
We'll have a market of 350 million people to supply potential customers in the United States.
Eddie Euger is also taking action against Deckers in Australia. He's alleged the company is guilty of deceptive conduct by using the name Ugg Australia when its boots are in fact made in China. He's also asked the Competition and Consumer Commission to investigate its website, which warns consumers not to buy so-called fakes, even implying they're funded by terrorist groups, including Al-Qaeda.
If it was proven that Uggs Australia aren't the only supposedly real Ugg boot, then people might start coming back to us and the original Ugg boot makers.
I believe in the Ugg boots that we made in Australia. I want to employ more people. I want us to be able to export, have a fair playing field out there.
Anne Barker with that ongoing battle.